Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to those who are new to the Feldenkrais method, and welcome to this series, Unraveling Body Anxiety. So I'm teaching this first lesson a little bit like an intro class. I know some of you are just joining to kind of check it out, see how it goes. And if you came on Sunday, we'll be doing the same lesson. And that's how I run my series. So I teach the lesson once on Sunday and then a second time on Wednesday. So if you're in the series, you can come both times. You can come to both days. You're always welcome to do that. Some people do that, or some people choose just to come to one. And I'll teach the lesson a little bit differently each time. So before we get into the lesson, I wanted to speak a little bit about this subject matter, anxiety. So we've already sort of evoked this thing, right? It's in the space. The word anxiety is in the space. And so there's this funny question: if the word is in the space, or if we're bringing attention to it, does the anxiety become more apparent? Or do you feed the anxiety just by giving it attention? So that's something we'll get curious about. And in the Feldenkrais method, we often think that focusing on the problem can actually be a part of the problem. So Feldenkrais would say that if you focus on the problem, you have a problem for life, or you keep feeding the problem and bringing attention to it. So we have this little bit of a paradox, because we actually do want to get curious about how anxiety manifests in our body. What are the movement patterns? What are the habits that we have? And in order to do that, we really do have to pay attention to it a little bit. So we can't just totally ignore it. So we'll bring attention to it, and then we'll bring attention to this unraveling or unwinding of it. So there's that. And then at the same time, we are going to be working with some specific patterns of movement that, so for instance, Feldenkrais wrote a lot in his books around the pattern of anxiety that is rooted in our fear of falling. So if you were to fall out of a tree, most everyone would curl up. You would protect your front, you would protect your vital organs. Or if you were scared, if somebody snuck up on you and scared you, you just think of a situation like that. Maybe that's happened recently, like somebody in your home that you're not actually afraid of, you aren't in danger, but they just kind of scare you. And you can think a bit about, oh, what did I do? What was my response? And just do that right now. See if you can imagine what your response is. Do you hold your breath? Do you tense your belly? Do you kind of curl inward a little bit? So there are certain things that are pretty universal that we all do when we're scared, or when we feel like, we're in danger, or when we have anxiety. And so some of those elements are going to be the same in all of us. And then we all have our really unique way of expressing them. So that's what we want to get very curious about. And we will a bit in this lesson. So if you came to the lesson on Sunday, you already know something about your pattern. And maybe you're like, I don't know, do I? I think you probably do. You probably learned at least something. And you can notice then today if a similar thing shows up, or you can play a little softer, a little bit lighter, in different qualities today. So the encouragement is to really follow your curiosity and follow a sense of ease and pleasure, And if anything is feeling uncomfortable, then please do less. I'll talk a little bit about the method sort of as we're going into the lesson for those of you who are newer. Okay, so we often start on the ground with the scan, but we're going to start in standing today. So, and you can always ignore my instructions if you're on the floor and you just really want to stay there. You know, I applaud if you don't listen to me and you follow your own desires, but we will start in standing. And, you know, that being said, everything that I am offering is just an invitation. So you're trusting yourself, your sensations above what I'm offering. So if you have a cushy mat, could you actually stand off of it so that you're either on a more firm, like harder floor, or just something that's more firm? And you can direct your eyes away from the screen. So you might even just turn away from the screen so that's not calling you. And just notice how you stand. What's showing up in this very initial moment of standing? Without having to fix anything, without judging. Good. Notice how you sense your breathing. Yeah, what's here right now in your sensation, in your awareness. And notice where your eyes are, what your eyes are looking at or towards, or if they're a bit in one direction. And if you were to just let your eyes go where they'd like to go, not telling them to do something particular, but just letting your eyes land or move wherever they would like to. It could be that they land somewhere and stay. It could be that they move around a bit. Good. And then just notice if you're having any kind of desire for movement. Like, do you really like being still here, or are you starting to feel maybe you're shifting or wanting to move a bit? Could you just really bring your attention to whatever bodily experience is already there and let your body do what it might want to do, moving with any kind of impulse. Just seeing what your body would do if you just follow a little thread of curiosity. And again, it might be really happy being still. Good. Okay, so come to your back. Come to lie on your back. It's just a little beginning standing scan. So you can lie with your legs long if that feels comfortable for this first scan. If that's not so comfortable for you, then bend your knees and stand your feet. And just take the first few moments just to feel what it's like to be on the floor, what it's like to have this different orientation with gravity. And start with your eyes open and continue this process of letting your eyes move where they'd want to move. And this is just in some ways a way for us to keep our environment a part of this process. So see what you see. And do your eyes go directly forward, or do they shift a little bit to one side? Good. And now just very slowly roll your head a little bit to one side and the other, just to see how free your head is to roll. And you may choose to keep your eyes open, or you may choose to close your eyes now. And see if you can start to notice the differences between the two sides as you're rolling your head. Is it easier to move or roll to one side? Is the quality different on another side? And if you feel like, I don't know, I can't sense that, then try going a little bit slower. And I'll be asking often for you to sense differences between sides, or differences from the beginning to after we do something. And if you can't sense something, that's okay. That's an answer. That is an answer. But you can always then try to do a little bit less. So as you can continue to roll your head, just very lazy way, notice if there's any response in your chest as you roll the head right and left. And then bring the head to the middle and begin to turn your attention to the sensation of your breathing, without any straining or a big change of the breath. And notice if there is any movement in your abdomen. So just a little, continue to just sense your breath, a little bit about effort. So all the instructions we will be playing with will be within this range of movement where there's really hardly any effort. And as soon as you feel maybe extra efforting or efforting in a different part of the body, then see if you can do the movement smaller or slower, or even imagine the movement. And it's not that we don't want to make efforts, we need to effort. But in this particular process, we're playing with doing less. Great. And so now just sense the contact of yourself with the floor, the pattern of pressure, the places where you meet the floor. And compare the two sides of your back, the two sides of your pelvis. And notice how your two shoulders are lying. Do you sense any differences here? The way that your right shoulder blade meets the floor compared to your left shoulder blade. Notice how wide you feel your shoulders are, how far away your right shoulder blade is from the spine, how far away your left shoulder blade is from the spine. So what is this sense of width of your shoulders? And what's the sense of width of your ribs? And then just check in a little bit with your emotional dimension, where you are right now in your feeling state. Just overall noticing. And bend your knees and stand your feet. And with your feet around hips distance, maybe a little bit wider, and just look for a place where you can place your feet and your leg muscles don't have to work too hard. So the more your feet can be underneath your knees, as long as that's comfortable. And now do a small movement of pressing both feet into the floor. So you just give a little bit of pressure down into the floor and then you let it go. And just do that a few times. Push with your feet into the floor and release. Repeating that. And see if you can notice the very moment that you start to put a little bit more pressure down into the floor with your feet, where do you feel the engagement? Do you feel, is it somewhere in your foot? Is it in your legs or your hips? Do you do something with your abdomen? Can you have this kind of dual attention of the ask to push the feet into the floor and then let go, as well as sensing your breathing? And does the small movement of pushing your feet down and then releasing, is the rest of your body responding? So feel what else moves from the pressure of the feet into the floor. Good. Now let that rest, keep your feet standing, and begin to do a small movement of tilting your pelvis so that you tuck your tail or you lift your tail just a little bit away from the floor. And then you let the tail come back down. So the pelvis will stay on the floor. It won't be that big of a movement, but you tilt your pelvis so that your lower back comes a little bit in the direction of the floor, and then you let it go. And do this several times. So today we are going to get very curious about the letting go of the action, right? So I'll give you a direction and then you'll release that direction, or you will reverse it, meaning you come back to the home base. And we'll pay just as much attention on what happens when we come back. So as you continue this little tilting of the pelvis, spread your attention and notice what other parts of yourself get involved. Like what's happening in your belly, in your abdomen, as you tilt the pelvis? And how does this movement travel through you? How does it move through your spine? And then when you let go of the movement, when you let go of the little lifting of the tail, what lets go? Does something let go in your abdomen? You may feel that your lower back comes away from the floor. Good. And do this just a few more times, noticing as you make the movement with your pelvis and as you spread your attention, traveling your attention up the spine, does the movement of your pelvis reach your head or your neck? Or does it stop before it gets there? And if it does, where does it stop? Good. All right. Pause for a moment and keep your knees bent and your feet standing if that's comfortable for you. And just bring attention to your face, sensations of the face, your jaw. Maybe open your mouth just a little bit. And so I will be cueing rest throughout the lesson. And if right now you're feeling like, oh, that was a lot of tilting the pelvis, that was a lot of one movement, then I encourage you to rest before I say rest. So it's a bit of self-regulation that we're also learning. Okay, so now bring your attention to your shoulders. And you can choose one shoulder and just take that shoulder and lift the shoulder a little bit away from the floor. And then bring it back to the floor. Yeah, and so a little bit is very small. So you're lifting the shoulder, but your elbow does not need to leave the floor. And you could have your hands on your belly. Some people have their hands on their belly. You could do that here. If your arms are straight out to the side, you might bring them a little bit closer to your body, if that's comfortable. Yeah, and so you can kind of play with that. So just this one shoulder that you're choosing to lift, lifting it. When I say lift it, it's moving in the direction of the ceiling, not the direction of your ear. And again, it's small enough that you don't lift your elbow. And really notice and even slow down the return of the shoulder to the floor. And once the shoulder gets to the floor, can you take a moment to pause before you lift the shoulder again? So we're not trying to get in a lot of repetitions, but can you slowly let the shoulder come down and then really feel the shoulder settle? Yeah, good. And so when you lift the shoulder, what happens to your ribs? What happens to your neck or head? See if you can start to notice the pattern or the expression of this movement through you. And in the same way, when the shoulder moves to the floor, what releases as your shoulder returns to the floor? Okay, let that go. Let that shoulder rest. Remember, you can always rest before I say. And now do the same thing with the other shoulder. And this was your second choice. So as you lift this shoulder, repeating that movement, letting it come back to the floor, is there something you notice about this shoulder that's different, that maybe that's why it was the second choice? Yeah, so it's just lifting at the tiniest amount and using that very small amount of lift as an invitation to sense how you do the movement. And then when you let it go, what lets go? And can you start to pay attention that when you lift the shoulder, some part of you presses, some part on the back of you presses into the floor? So what part of you presses into the floor when you lift the shoulder? And whatever part gets a little bit deeper, feels like there's more pressure or more weight that goes back into the floor as you lift the shoulder, could you encourage that? Could you actually initiate there a little bit? Push that part of your back into the floor as you lift the shoulder, and then let it go as you release the shoulder back down. Good. Let that shoulder rest. And now one time lift the first shoulder that you chose and lower it. And then lift the second shoulder. And just alternate slowly, comparing, noticing what it's like to lift one shoulder, how the chest changes shape when you lift the shoulder. Does your head or your neck respond in any way? and how that is on the other side. Yeah, that's right. Feeling how the weight, the pressure begins to kind of rock to one side and then the other as you lift one shoulder and the next. And as you're trying to sense differences between the two shoulders, if it's difficult for you to feel a difference, could you just do the movement even smaller? So you can just feel the very beginning. Okay, pause, let that rest. Take your legs long. Okay, so now imagine that a medicine ball, or like one of those big exercise balls, is coming down from the ceiling and it's coming towards you. And if you did not move or respond, it would land on you. I know it's we're evoking that image, and so you would want to protect yourself. You'd want to get out of the way or do something. So using that image that the ball is coming down, notice what's the first thing that you would do. So you can just begin the movement and then let it go. Okay. Yeah. And whatever you're doing, you may be rolling, you may be putting your hands up, you might be lifting your legs, whatever your expression is of that protection. Could you do it much smaller? So it's like the very beginning. So if you were lifting your arms, maybe your arms don't even leave the ground, but you start to feel, okay, what do I need to initiate to lift the arms? Or if you are rolling, what's the very first moment of the roll? And see what you can notice in that very first moment. What happens to your abdomen, your breathing, your eyes. So you see if you can notice what's there right away. Yeah, try to do it even smaller. Yeah, do you feel a tension build somewhere? And then of course you're letting it go. Okay, let that rest. So these protective patterns, we need them. They are supportive to us, but we want to be able to act when we need to, and we want to be able to move out of those protective patterns, right, and not get stuck there. Okay, so bend your knees, stand your feet. And now let's play a little bit with connecting the movement of your pelvis and the movement of your shoulders. So choose one shoulder again. And this time you'll tilt the pelvis like we did and lift this one shoulder simultaneously. And then let go of that action of the shoulder and the pelvis. So you tilt the pelvis so that the lower back comes a little bit to the floor and simultaneously lift that one shoulder and then let it release. And start to notice when you do this, when you're starting to do both at the same time, what's the particular shaping of yourself? What happens to your abdomen and your chest? And a few more times do this and see if you can start to initiate the movement from the center of yourself. So could you push back? Could you press into the floor somewhere? Maybe some ribs from behind or some part of your spine pushes backwards in such a way that it would gather the pelvis and the shoulder into this pattern. And then really notice what happens on the release. Really let it go. Good. Okay, let that rest. Take your legs long. Notice your breathing. And sense the two sides of yourself for a moment. Good. Bend your knees again, stand your feet, and tilt your pelvis and the second shoulder, the other shoulder, and just right away see if you can notice what's the difference in the shape of your chest and the front of you. And what starts to happen with your head and your eyes when you do this movement. Feeling this, some sense of folding together in the front. And again, can you push backward somewhere into the floor? Ribs from behind, some part of your back. Can you press that into the floor so that your pelvis and your shoulder gather a little bit towards one another? And when you do that, can you tell, are you inhaling or are you exhaling? Do you do the movement on the inhale or do you do the movement on the exhale? Good. And now alternate shoulders. So one shoulder lifts and the pelvis tilts. And then you let it go and pause. And then the other shoulder tilts. Sorry, the other shoulder lifts as the pelvis tilts and you let it go. Yeah. Yeah, so the hands are resting on the floor, the elbows are still on the floor. It's just the shoulder lifting, feeling that folding action that happens in your ribs. So alternating back and forth, one shoulder with the pelvis and then the other shoulder. And just see if you can feel, is there a preference? Is there one side that feels more familiar to you, more clear? So again, you're just trying to sense the difference. Great. And then let that rest. Take your legs long. You can also rest on your side if you're feeling like we've been on our back for a while and you want to just roll to your side. Yeah, and so wherever you are on your side or your back, can you open your eyes and allow a little bit of time for your eyes to just kind of space out? See where the eyes want to go. So you include the room in your experience. Okay, return to your back if you're on your side. And bend your knees and stand your feet. And now lift both shoulders as you tilt your pelvis. So the tail lifts a little bit and both shoulders lift in the direction of the ceiling. And then you release the tilt of the pelvis and release the shoulders. So simultaneously, the front of your body starts to curl or gather together a little bit, and then you let it go. So notice how your chest moves. And notice what happens to your abdomen. Yeah. And so whatever you're doing, can you do it in a way that doesn't feel like this is a lot of work? So the movement could be a little smaller, and you'll still feel that sense of gathering. Great. And notice what happens to your neck and your head. So when your shoulders lift and your pelvis tilts, would you say that your chin moves toward your chest or away from your chest? So just watch what's already happening. And can you let your mouth be slightly open? And then, yeah, and I can't see everybody, but I know this is happening for many of you. So now as you lift your shoulders, let your chin move a little bit away from your chest. So you allow this feeling of a slight arch in the back of your neck. So the pelvis tilts and the shoulders lift at the same time. And when that happens, you're just letting this small movement of the head be there where the chin moves a little bit away from the chest. See if that feels comfortable or possible for you. Great. Okay, pause for a moment. And just notice your breathing. And bend your elbows and bring both hands to your abdomen. And now walk your hands up until you can feel some ribs, but then right in the middle where where the soft tissue ends and you start to feel that center bone, which is the base of your sternum. So with your finger pads, could you just walk your finger pads up that breastbone or sternum bone and just feeling the whole length of it. You can keep walking your fingers up until you feel the little notch in your throat, which would be the end of it, where you don't feel bony anymore. So it's a pretty long distance, the sternum, and our ribs attach to the sternum, and then the ribs continue around the back and attach to the spine. So with both hands, place your finger pads somewhere along the sternum. Could be kind of more in the center of the sternum. And now tilt your pelvis and lift your two shoulders. And as you do that, just let your hands sense the direction of the sternum and then let it release. So to begin with, your fingers, your hands are just kind of going for a ride on your sternum and maybe sensing your ribs also. Good. And then just let your hands encourage the sternum and the ribs in this direction. They're already moving. So as you lift the shoulders and tilt the pelvis, just encourage that sternum a little bit downward towards the pelvis. Maybe you're sensing there's a little bias to the sternum one way or another. And really feeling that when you then let go of the movement and you return, maybe something more can release this kind of unwinding back to neutral, and perhaps letting go somewhere else in your jaw or your breathing. Let that rest. Take your arms down. Good. Open your jaw or open your mouth just slightly. Feel the back of the head, where the back of the head meets the floor. And just do a small movement of lifting your chin a little bit away from your chest. And you can even take your eyes upward in the direction of your eyebrows. And then bring the head back to neutral. Yeah, just what's easy. So tilting the head, moving the chin a little bit away from the sternum with the mouth open and the eyes look towards the eyebrows. And then come back to neutral. Yeah. And as you do that small movement of the head, notice your abdomen, your breath. Great. Now bring your two hands behind your neck and actually take your finger pads to the very base of your skull. So you can just start to look for the edge or the ridge of the skull. And if you kind of come to the middle, you may be able to feel one of those uppermost cervical vertebrae. And then just walk your hands down kind of at the top of the neck and bring the pads of the right hand, right fingers, just to the right of that bony part of the spine you can feel. And then the pads of the left hand to the left of the spine. And with your hands being really gentle here, just give a little pressure forward or in the direction of the ceiling so that your neck arches, that same movement we were just doing, encouraging this little arching of the neck or opening of the throat. That's right. And you can find a way where this feels really comfortable for your shoulders and your hands. So, see maybe pointing the elbows towards the ceiling makes it easier. You don't have to effort too much in your arms. And see what works for you there. And as you arch the neck, can you include the tilt of the pelvis? So your chin moves a little bit away from the chest. That's right. And the tail lifts. So that as your lower back moves into the floor, your chin gently comes away from the chest and the eyes can look up. Let that go and just pause. Bring your arms down. Okay, so we're going to put all these pieces together. You can keep your arms alongside your body. You could put your hands on your sternum if you like that. So let your mouth be a little open. And play with tilting your pelvis so your tail will lift and letting your neck arch. And then let it release. And as your tail lifts, as you tilt the pelvis, sense your sternum moving a little bit down, the sternum coming down, your neck arching all together. And then really listen to the return, the letting go of those actions. Yeah, so repeating this, but really taking a moment to pause after each time you do the movements. And can you, when you're doing the action of tilting the pelvis and arching the neck, can you do it on a breath in? What's that feel like? Does that feel strange? Does that feel like what you were doing? Good. And now try doing it on an exhalation. So tilt the pelvis as you exhale and arch the neck. And just let the air come out however it does. So you exhale and you tilt the pelvis. Feel what happens in the abdomen. Which means when you return, you take a breath in, let the belly expand, really kind of pause before you begin again. Good. And now play with lifting one shoulder. And notice how that changes the shape of your chest. So you're still tilting the pelvis, lifting one shoulder, letting the head respond. And then you can try it with the other shoulder. Great. Okay. Take a moment to rest. Take your legs long. Let it all go. Let go of the words, let go of all of the attention. Just see if you can sense any movement in your low belly. Bend your knees and stand your feet. And turn your head to one side and just notice what you see there. And play with the movement of tilting your pelvis and lifting your shoulders, and notice what happens when your head is turned like this. So you don't have to turn your head so far that it's uncomfortable. So the feet are standing and you tilt the pelvis and lift the two shoulders. It's just what happens with your chin in relation to your chest when your head is turned like this. Good. And then turn the head the other way. Feel what it's like on the second side, knowing that this is your second choice. Now, having your head turn like this, does it affect where you press more into the floor? Which shoulder would be easier to lift with your head turned this way? Okay, bring your head back to the middle. And now just lift your right shoulder. Just see what it's like to do that small movement of lifting the right shoulder and then lowering it down. Good. And as you lift the right shoulder, can you roll your head to the right? And then gently return. Feel it lets go when you return. Do this a few times, lifting the right shoulder and rolling the head to the right. Soft eyes, easy jaw. Good. Now continue to lift the right shoulder, but roll your head away from the right shoulder. Just feeling that possibility that as the right shoulder lifts, the head rolls to the left. Yeah. Again, easy jaw, soft muscles of the face. Good. Okay, pause. Just pause and sense the two shoulders. Now begin to lift your left shoulder Just lift the shoulder on its own once and bring it down. And when the direction is to lift the left shoulder, does the head already respond in some way? Can you tell that there's one direction that it would prefer to go? So try rolling your head in whatever direction you think that would be. Well, there's many ways it could go. We're giving ourselves two options, to the right or to the left. So whatever feels like the pattern that feels easiest for you, try that. Great. Okay, let that rest. Rest with your legs long, or if you want to roll to your side. And again, just notice your breathing. Anything else that you're starting to become aware of? Open your eyes and see what you see in your environment. Okay, now come back to your back, bend your knees and stand your feet. And do a small movement of flexing your ankles. So the toes and the balls of the feet leave the floor, the heels will stay on the floor. So you flex your ankles, and kind of pulling your toes in the direction of your knees, and then let that go. And you can even let it go kind of quickly, just kind of plop to the floor. And when you flex the ankles, start to feel the movement, how it travels through you. And when you flex the ankles, you could encourage that little tilting of the pelvis. Yeah, so if you're not feeling a movement traveling through, you can begin to encourage it. You could imagine, like, you think of the spine, like when you flex your ankles, it's almost like the spine gets pushed a little bit headward. And then when your feet come back to the floor, it kind of rebounds back. So as you flex your feet, the pelvis will tilt a little bit and the neck can gently arch. And then you just drop your feet. And again, it may feel like a little bounce or reverb through your whole self. Great. Okay, now bring the soles of the feet to the floor. Keep the soles of the feet on the floor and push the feet a little bit into the floor. And you can almost think as though you want to push the feet down into the floor and a little bit away from your head. And that's right. You'll feel that tilting of the pelvis and the chin tip back, and then let that go. And try that, repeating that a number of times, feeling how your whole self responds to this movement of your feet. Pressing and releasing. And just see, as we're still doing it kind of slowly, do you feel a more clear pathway through yourself than you did at the beginning? That's right. And so you can always remember, you can always turn the volume down. If this is a lot of work in your legs, or if there's a cramp in a leg, rest, and then just turn the volume down a little bit. Good. Can you start to do this quicker? So this little pressure of the feet, this little rocking sensation through you, can you begin to do it very quickly? So the movement may need to be smaller. And really, once you find that rocking, it's just seeing how little effort you need to keep the rocking going. How little effort, how little push of the feet into the floor do you really need? It's sensing the skeletal connection all the way up to the head and making this quick kind of oscillation like a jello being wiggled. And as you continue that rocking, easy in your jaw, can you keep it going light and quickly and slowly roll your head in one direction? So the rocking is very quick, maybe many, many rocks as you roll your head to one side. And that's right, your chin might bob a little bit. And then you roll your head back to the middle. You see many, many rocks. And noticing your breathing, the movement of your abdomen. And you roll your head to the other side, just slowly rolling the head while there are many rocks. And when you feel like you'd like to rest from this, let it go and take your legs long. Notice how you meet the floor. Now, can you imagine again this medicine ball falling, coming towards you? And notice what the pattern is that's right there for you. What'd you do? And just the beginning of it. If you're moving your arms or your legs, can you notice what you do in the center of yourself? How do you organize in the center of yourself? And notice if this pattern is it the same? Is it different? You could try, what would another thing be that you would do? Do you have another option? A different response? Yeah. And remember, you do the action and then you let it go and really like linger in the letting go and the pause. Take a breath. Good. Yeah. Just the beginning, like just imagine what you would do. So if you're, again, lifting a limb or something, don't actually lift the limb. Just imagine that you would lift the limb and feel what engages. Is it your jaw? Is it your belly? Here's where we're getting very curious. Like, what is it for you? Okay, let that rest. And just roll your head side to side. See what that feels like. And when you're ready, roll to sit and make your way up to stand. And really take a moment in standing as you're just in this new orientation with gravity. So seeing what it's like to be upright now, just what shows up right away in your awareness and your sensation. Yeah, so you don't need to direct yourself towards me in any way. What is it like to stand, to be upright? And let your eyes go where they would like to go. And then see if you have any impulse, like we did at the beginning of the lesson, any kind of impulse to move. Following that impulse. Walking if you'd like, shifting your weight. Great. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for the lesson tonight. After each lesson, I keep the meeting up for question and answer. And so I always love hearing what you're noticing, what you're feeling, or if you have any questions. And you're also welcome to just stay in your sensation.